What's going on, guys? My name is Arrow, and in today's video we are talking about my 3.21 League starter Vaal Ice Shot Deadeye. It's going to be awesome. Let's go. Alright, so let's start with a bunch of warnings. This is not fully tested. There's a couple of reasons why. Number one, lots of things in 3.21 are not testable. We can't test the additional arrows while leveling. We can't test Mana Forged arrows, which looks really strong. We can't test Vaal Ice Shot or Vaal Arctic Armor, both of which will be in this build. So some testing is going to have to happen live when we get into the new league. Come and check out my stream, twitch.tv/AER0___, and look for update videos from me as well on this YouTube. So subscribe and comment and like down below. I'll be live for 24 hours on League Start. So come visit, see what I'm up to, and you can see how the build is going. So aside from things that are difficult to test because the new league is not out yet, I was very busy this week with real life and also just content creation. So I didn't have time to do my usual testing, which is actually incredibly extensive. When I put out a league starter, I make sure to go through from level 1 all the way to maps, red maps, kill the bosses several times. I simply didn't have the time to do all of that for this Ice Shot build. However, I've played Ice Shot a bunch of times, so I know how the build works. But this build has been substantially buffed from the times that I've played it in the past. So I did some very early testing, and I figured out how it would feel before you even get those additional arrows. I've got the skill gems set up in a way that feel really, really smooth to play. You're going to see some of the leveling here in the background. This is before you get additional arrows and before you get Vaal Ice Shot, and it feels super, super nice. So once you get those things, you drop volley, you add another damage support in, it's going to feel fantastic. Warning number 2, this is a Deadeye bow league starter. This is not tanky. I've added things in this build that are going to make it be able to survive a lot of things, but it is not going to be tanky. If you want a tanky league starter, you shouldn't be starting a bow skill. There are some bow skills that can get a little bit more defenses than others, but a Deadeye hit-based bow is just not tanky. So if you don't enjoy that, don't play this build. I don't want to trick anyone into playing a bow skill on League Start and then have them come back in the comments and say, I died, when they don't have any evasion gear, they didn't get their spell suppress capped, and they're complaining about dying. You have to get the defenses in the build, and it's still not going to be that tanky. But Ice Shot is a very, very fun skill. This build is going to be fast. It's going to freeze everything, which feels super, super nice. I know that's not technically a defensive layer. It doesn't show up in the EHP, but it is a strong defensive layer. So you get your hit up and you get your freezes up, spell suppression, evasion, and the build is going to feel fine. Also, this build is going to get enough damage, I believe, to delete bosses and delete the league mechanic. I think it's going to be a very challenging league mechanic, but with our ballistas and our Vaal Ice Nova up, our damage is going to be really, really good, I think. Of course, I have not played all the new stuff yet, so I cannot promise you that. I just want people to know going in that this is not guaranteed. I am pretty sure it's going to be amazing, but with all League Start situations where you're playing something that's a little bit new, you can't know for sure. The number one reason I'm playing this is because I want to play bows. I miss playing bows. I am going to sacrifice some tankiness, etc. on League Start so I can play something that's really, really fun. Don't forget how important it is to have fun in PoE. If you're a newer player and you don't ever want to die, and dying is going to make you frustrated, then don't play this build, because it's going to die from time to time. But really, the most important thing I can stress here is that if you go into League Start, and it usually takes you 10 or 12 hours to get to maps, then you're going to go to bed, and then you're going to wake up the next day and you're going to play some more. You're not one of those people who's really benefiting from the day one push. It doesn't really matter if you shave a half an hour or an hour off of your League Start time to get to maps. Having fun is so much more important, and I really want people that aren't racing to really try to look a little bit differently at your League Start and make sure you're having fun. The last disclaimer, this guide is not fully fleshed out, so there's going to be some differences that you may find are a little bit better. Like, one of the things that I'm not super sure on is if I'm going to go with Mirage Archer or not. I'm going to see how it feels with the new Vengeance Cascade in the end game. If those extra arrows feel really, really nice for clear, I'll keep it. If not, I'll probably go with added cold damage. There's also times where you're going to need to figure out things for yourself. Like, do you have enough accuracy in the moment? There's some accuracy that was pulled off of the tree, and it's a little bit harder to get to 100% even as a Deadeye who's getting all this dexterity. So it'll be important for you to know that you need to look at your accuracy from time to time to make sure you're not missing shots, because that feels pretty bad. Another thing is mana reservation. That can be a really tough one, and I think it's important that folks know when they need to switch gear or change an aura out to try to have enough mana and, you know, make sure that your sniper's mark is always going off. You got to be able to pay attention to those things. So this is not super new player friendly, but it's not some expert build. So just keep those things in mind, and let's get into talking about the POB. Okay, let's talk a little bit about our skills. So we are using an Ice Shot. This POB is set up with no quality on any of your gems, so obviously your damage is going to end up being a lot higher. So we've got Ice Shot in here, and I'm not entirely sure, as I mentioned, if I'm going to do added cold or Mirage Archer. That's going to see, it's going to depend on how things feel. We are going to be using a second 6-link. No, you can drop cold pen until if you have a 5-link. This is going to be 5 shot ballista totems that use focus ballista. That means that when you attack, they also attack. So if we go over here and check out our Ice Shot, here we have 5. Let's do a little full DPS thing here. We have 5 of these, which is about 3.5 million damage. Then we have our regular Ice Shot. We will talk a little bit about how this works as well. So I currently have 3 counts in here. The reason I have 3 counts is because when you have Vengeance Cascade, you're going to pierce the boss, and it's going to come back through and hit the boss a second time. So that's 2 counts, right? Obviously, you're going to hit them once on the way through, and then on the way back. And then the 3rd count comes from our Ascendancy's Chant Helmet. The idea here is we have a Hydrosphere that will cast on the boss. It'll pierce through the Hydrosphere, and the cone from hitting the Hydrosphere will hit the boss. But Hydrosphere can only be hit once per second. However, you put 2 Hydrospheres with different levels into this helmet, it'll cast one after the other, and it'll reset that 1-second timer, because it's technically a new Hydrosphere. So that means you can do this basically as many times per second as you can cast up to the 0.3 cooldown on the helmet. Shout out to If and Jeff, the maker of the build of the week, for helping me with this tech. I did a little showcase on stream. This is awesome stuff. So this is going to allow you to essentially get another round of hits from your Ice Shot on the boss. So that's why we have a count of 3 on here. This is not exact, it's just estimated. So with this gear, with Vengeance Cascade, you're also going to get hits on the way back with your Ice Shot. So again, assuming everything's perfect, you're going to get 5 going through and 5 coming back as they return to the totems. And that would bring you up to 13 million DPS. Now, this is obviously just like napkin math, but to give you an idea of how many projectiles are going to be flying around the screen and how many of them are going to be able to hit single targets, you're going to have a lot of damage. Now, this doesn't include Vaal Ice Shot, which I can't put into the POB. The numbers on that are effectively, you're going to have 6, I guess you could call them totems. They're like Mirage Archers that are effectively doing half damage each. So that's like 3 times more damage of your Ice Shot. So you can turn that up to 6. Now we're at 20 million DPS. Well, those arrows are going to hit on the way back too because of Vengeance Cascade. So is that another 3? At this point, trying to figure out the DPS is effectively impossible. But what I'm trying to say is, when you log into POB and you see 2 million damage, that is not our damage. That is 1 arrow. We're going to hit 1 million arrows, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So don't worry about trying to figure out your actual DPS. I know I certainly don't want to. We'll turn off this full DPS for now. So we're going to be using Herald of Ice and Precision. Those things are kind of mandatory. Herald of Ice feels so good to clear with. You got shatters everywhere. It feels awesome. Hatred is going to be used in the build when you can afford it. It's so powerful. In the endgame version, we have a replica Here's Truth, which I don't assume will be very expensive because it doesn't have life on it. Not a lot of people use it. And I really don't think this is going to be as much of a bow league as I'd like. So I don't think these items are going to get that expensive. But Replica's Here's Truth gives you 100% increased mana reservation efficiency for Hatred. But once you have that, we have our Hatred down here being enabled from the Amulet. With the new Mastery update, a lot of our reservation was lost, like for Precision and Grace. So this is going to make our reservation a little sticky. So you're going to have to feel it out when you get to endgame. What can you afford? How much reservation efficiency do you currently have on your gear? And what can you run because of that? Arctic armor, I think, is going to be really big for us because we're going to be standing still and attacking for our focus ballistas. So if this is on, we probably can't run Grace. But we're getting a lot of evade chance from other sources. We have a ton of evasion rating. We're getting blind. We're investing into it on the tree. So we still have a really good evade chance even without Grace. Grace takes us up to 84, but this is with no Watcher's Eyes or anything like that. As you get more investment into the build, you can get reservation efficiency on a cluster, and then you can put Grace back in. I have Hatred here because when you're not running the amulet, you have to use Gem. But again, you're gonna have to figure that out as you go, like how much you can afford to put into the build. So the helmet, we talked about the Hydrospheres alternating. We also have Sniper's Mark in here. The reason Sniper's Mark is in here is because Mark on hit gives you a pretty significant damage reduction of Sniper's Mark. It reduces the effectiveness of it. So I'm gonna put it in the helmet just to get full effect. And then we have Power Charge on crit to give us power charges to get this crit up. It's really hard to get crit chance now. There was some serious nerfs to the amount of crit that you can get on the tree. We lost the spell suppression mastery that gives you 100% crit chance. That's huge. So 64 is pretty good, but yeah, power charges are going to be really nice. We have a blink arrow, steel skin setup. These are obviously important. And then ensnaring arrow and mirage archer, you basically attack the boss one time with ensnaring arrow as you run around and throw all your stuff down, and your mirage archer will continue to hit it with ensnaring arrows. Don't be afraid to play around with these skills. If you see something else you want to put in here, just do it. Let's talk about the gear. First, number one, the bow. So this bow right here is pretty good, right? 618 DPS. It probably looks like it's going to be hard to get one of these. It really is not. If you farm the dunes in 80 plus zones for the Imperial Bow 6-link, you can farm yourself a 6-link. And I actually recommend doing that because buying bows with decent trees is going to be tough, Crucible trees. So if you farm your own, you can just farm up a couple of these until you get a decent tree. But when you get one of these, you can use a Deafening Essence of Hatred to get that huge flat cold damage. And you basically just use a couple of those until you get some number of percent fizz, flat fizz, attack speed, crit chance, elemental damage with attacks, critical strike multiplier. All of these things are really good. So you get a couple of those, you craft on a third thing, you have this bow. It probably shouldn't take you more than 5 of those essences. So maybe that costs you 20C on League Start, 30C. I'm not sure what those essences are going to cost early on, but it is not hard to make yourself a bow like this in red maps. So next we have the quiver. You want things like projectile speed, attack speed, life, damage with bow skills, multi, crit chance. All of these things are going to be really good. You just want to get the most number of those things that you can. Additional arrow is obviously good, but you don't need to get additional arrows here. You're going to have 5 total from the tree and your Ascendancy, and for Ice Shot, that is more than enough. We are not relying on Barrage in our main setup to do damage, so scaling projectiles just isn't that valuable. Go get some damage on the quiver. As an S mark, we've talked about what is going to be in here. Unfortunately, this item outside of its usability is not that good. It gives you energy shield that we don't do anything with, gives you a little bit of attack speed, and that's pretty much it. You can get an enchant on here of any kind, whether it's reservation efficiency for one of our auras, Ice Shot AoE, Ice Shot damage, all of those things are great. Blood Rage, trying to get something on there that's useful is pretty nice. For our chest, our endgame chest is going to be Hiri's Ire. This is just a huge amount of a few things that we really want. Evasion, flat cold damage added to our attacks, and spell suppression. This item makes it super easy for us to get to 100%. Almost no spell suppression on our gear. We do get a little bit on our boots and gloves, 6% here and 8% here. And when we're on full life, we get an additional 10%. So you could drop most of this and be at 100% if you don't mind the on full life. We have pretty good recovery, about 1,000 per second against single target, and we have life flasks. So that might be a good move to ease up your gearing for the first couple of days. But we only need a little bit of extra spell suppression aside from what we get on the tree and this chest. The amulet, this is huge. If you can get this amulet in the first couple of days, I don't know what this is going to cost, but this amulet is fantastic. It allows us to fit hatred in for much, much cheaper. It gives us a higher level hatred, and it also gives us culling strike, which is really, really nice. You can get it on the tree, but we don't really have the points to spend. So on top of that, it gives you a little bit of dex and multi. And then we have it anointed with Vengeant Cascade. So let's talk about Vengeant Cascade. It was reworked this patch to essentially make it so projectiles just return now. If it's not a duration projectile, it'll just return whenever it's done. So if you can get a pierce on the boss, it'll go through the boss and then return to you and hit the boss a second time. We get pierce, therefore Vengeance Cascade is effectively doubling the damage of each one of our bows that pass through an enemy twice. For our rings, these are super simple. We've got res on here, we've got life, and then we have -7 to mana cost. This is really important to get. I know people don't like to have this on their early builds because it's not easy to get yourself, but you can always ask somebody on TFT, maybe charging 2 or 3 C, or maybe not charging at all, to put this on an item. It's so nice, such big quality of life to get minus mana cost for your skills. This counts for everything. It counts for your sniper's mark that's getting cast all the time. It counts for the hydrospheres that are getting cast, so those have no mana cost when you have these rings. So highly recommend that, but otherwise the rings are just a little bit of life and resist. The belt, effectively the same thing. You're gonna want some life, you want some res. You're gonna have to get some stats in some places. When you're not using the Replica Hero's Truth, you can use an amulet that just has strength and intelligence on it to solve those problems. But you don't have to get any of the res or stats on any particular gear. You just gotta get them all. Another thing you can get on this belt is some elemental damage with attack skills. That's a nice little boost of damage. And I recommend a Stygian because then you can use a Searching Eye Jewel. What I have on here is life and some added cold, and then I have blind in here. I also have blind on the tree, so that's not necessary to get on top of it, but this gives you access to a little bit more out of your belt. The jewels, I just have 3 basic jewels in here that have attack speed, multi, and life on them. I would recommend going for your jewel slots last, as it's tougher to get really good jewels early on, but what you have here in this 3 mod is not unachievable. The flasks, we have movement speed, we have a jade flask with evasion on it. We have a diamond flask with reduced effective curses on you on it. That's super important. Curses are so strong. And if you're not super overcapped, then Ellie weakness is just going to wreck you. So definitely recommend having that on there. And then we have an onslaught flask with attack speed. Lastly, we have a panic divine flask with corrupted blood immunity on it. Panicked, in my opinion, is the best flask because you really only ever find yourself hitting it when you're below 50% life. And this gives you instant recovery on low life. So a couple thousand instant life. So for our trees, I have leveling trees here starting at 32 normal lab. Maybe I'll include another one for like level 15, but you basically just path through here. You get this life, you get this life, and then you want to grab the additional arrows. You want to get the pierce, and then you can do the life and leech afterwards. But we have leveling trees for normal lab, crow lab, when you get to maps, the early end game in the 80s, and then your level 95 tree. Some interesting things to note. We get frenzy charge from the mark mastery here, so we have it on single target. You don't need this if you're using blood rage during maps, but once you get to the pinnacle bosses, you're going to need this, so you can probably get this last or whenever you find that you need it. The attack mastery here, nearby enemies are intimidated while you have rage. This is okay for us. We're not using point blank, so we're trying to stay far away from enemies, but being able to intimidate packs of enemies that are nearby, because we're always going to have rage once we have the rage gloves, is really nice. So but again, you don't need this until you have rage on your gloves. So again, keep that in mind. This mastery, super important. Proj speed applies to damage as well with bows. It's just a huge amount of damage because we love proj speed. Proj speed on Ice Shot feels really nice. Another notable mastery here for us is the new hits have 25% chance to treat enemy monster elemental resistance values as inverted. That means if a monster has 50 resists, 25% of the time it will treat their resists as -50. We don't get a lot of monster resistance reduction in this build. We have some pen, but not a lot of reduction. And the idea is, one, it uses curses usually to do that, and we prefer to have just the one curse be Sniper's Mark, so that 25% of the time we're getting a massive amount of damage from this mastery. This is perfect for things like Omniscience that are penning and not lowering the res of an enemy, but it's also really good on League Start where you just don't have access to a bunch of minus res for monsters. So for us, this is perfect. You're going to take that nice and early, and it's going to give you a huge damage boost on the rares and uniques. Another thing that we're grabbing that isn't super, I guess, meta is the blind stuff over here. Because we're having a little bit of trouble getting to 100% hit chance, with some of the accuracy changes. Blind is a really, really nice way to solve that. So this wheel gives you 30% chance to blind enemies on hit with attacks. You're going to hit enemies a bunch of times, so everything's going to be blinded. And you get some blind effect as well. So what this does is this gives you increased accuracy rating because enemies evade less. So it makes it easier for you to get to 100%. And it also gives you more chance to evade. So this evade chance number is 74%. This is really high for only having 15,000 evasion. That's why I'm okay with not using Grace as long as I can't afford to. And this also gives us a bunch more crit chance, which we are severely lacking. So this is normally not something you'd see in a build like this, but I thought it was worth taking. If you get some accuracy on gear, then this may be worth dropping and investing into some more damage or life somewhere else. Our Ascendancy, we're going to start with Gathering Winds. Gathering Winds is a nice speed boost, and it just makes leveling feel a lot better. After that, we want to rush for Endless Munitions, so we're going to go for Far Shot first. I chose the Far Shot playstyle instead of the Point Blank playstyle because it's just more damage, and on a league start where you don't have as good of defenses, you don't want to be point blanking bosses because you're going to get hit from time to time with those like Minotaur melee hits, and you're just going to die. So Far Shot is a much, much better playstyle for the early game. Also, I like Far Shot, even though this gives you projectile barrages have no spread. I like Far Shot better when I'm not using barrage. The reason is monsters move around, and when you're far away from them, they move more. So if you have to hit barrages, Far Shot stinks. So because we're not relying on barrage, Far Shot is much better. Then we're going to take in our third lab the Endless Munitions for 2 more proj. That'll give us 5 total projectiles, which feels fantastic with no GMP. And then lastly, in your Uber lab, you're going to take Focal Point, bunch more damage from our Sniper's Mark. And it also makes it so you take less damage from enemies near your marked enemy, which is underrated in the middle of a big pack. That's pretty much it for the tree. Guys, I want to reiterate, this is a risky start. It's a Deadeye bow build. It's not tanky. So if you are not interested in playing a build like this that can blast maps, then you probably should find something else. But I wanted to share with everybody what I'm going to league start because everybody's asking for it. So if you play this and you have questions, come over to my stream, twitch.tv/AER0__. I would be happy to help and share with you guys the solutions that I'm finding to the problems that we run into. PoE is a game of problem solving. If you have no problems to solve, this game would not be very fun. So I'm sure we'll find plenty of problems to solve with the new league mechanic if it's especially challenging. And I think we're going to have a ton of fun on this league start. Again, I'm doing a 24-hour stream on Friday. Starting at 1 p.m. Eastern time, I'm going to be doing a little podcast sort of event with Omicid and Lalcohol. So come check that out. We're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to talk about our league start plans, our Atlas tree plans, all that, and get real hyped for the league start. So that's going to be it from me. Sorry for the long video, but I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope you join me on this Ice Shot Bow Deadeye journey in 3.21 Crucible, and we're going to have some fun with it. And as always, take care.